Hi, this video is going to introduce you to the new Vermont MSGP DMR Compliance Dashboard and show you how to prepare for and submit your quarterly electronic discharge monitoring reports, otherwise called the eDMR. Your dashboard is the starting point each reporting quarter. It tells you what needs to be monitored, provides links to submit your eDMR, and helps you understand what will be required the next quarter. Going through it, what you will notice is you should have a link directly to your facility's dashboard. If not, you would just type your permit number in up here and hit View Report. Below that, you want to confirm that your permit number is showing up and it's your current permit number. If you ever need to look at a copy of your authorization, you can click here to do so. Next, we've got this panel here, which is compliance details, and we'll go through each one so you understand what they are. The next DMR due by box will show you when your next DMR is due. It's always due 30 days after the end of a quarter and which quarter you're reporting for. So in this case, I've got a test permit up, so you're going to see some funny data, but the 4 quarter will be the quarter that you're working with, and the due date for that quarter is the big green date. It will tell you how many days you have left to submit your DMR, and then we've got the Submit DMR button, which we'll come back to that in just a bit. Here you'll see total DMRs submitted and the number of DMRs you've submitted so far. Once you start submitting DMRs over time, you may want to look at your results. You'll be able to do that by clicking on this See All Results button, and it will take you to another page, and you'll be able to see in detail each of your submissions for each of your parameters over time since your permit was issued. You may or may not see this next box, which is parameters under corrective action. This is just a box to remind you that if you have annual parameters that did not meet their permitted limits, they weren't within range, you then go into corrective action. Typically, those annual limits are just due once a year. Once you're in corrective action, they're due quarterly. So this is a reminder to test those parameters. You do have parameters that you typically would need to submit annually, but because they're under corrective action, you're now required to submit them quarterly until you're back in compliance. And then the last box is helpful links, which gives you links to all of the guidance documents you should need if you have any questions, and a link right to the MSGP website that will have even more information should you need it. This bottom panel is one of the most important, and it's what you're going to want to be paying close attention to, as it basically functions as a checklist of what you're going to need to monitor for the next quarter coming up, and what you don't need to monitor for because you may be in compliance with those parameters. And each time you submit a DMR, the needs for the next DMR will change. So this is going to tell you what you need for this quarter, what you can expect to see on your DMR when you open it up, and when you finish submitting your current DMR, and it's had time to reach our system, you can refresh your dashboard, come back here, and now you'll see your new checklist with what you're going to need for your next quarter. So we'll go through that a little bit. What we have in this table is your outfall name. So you may just have one discharge point at your facility, or you may have more. This one has 2. So here's discharge point 1 and all of the data associated to discharge point 1. Limit type lets you know what kind of parameters and which guidelines they're falling under. So we've got a benchmark parameter, which is basically your monitoring parameters that you do quarterly until you meet your permitted requirements. So it tells you these are benchmarks, they're due quarterly. Here's a list of what those parameters are. They're what's called the statistical base code, what you're looking to report to us. So it's a quarterly average. If you take one sample, you just give us that number. If you take 2 or 3 samples in a quarter, you would average them, and those are the numbers you're giving us. This is your permitted limit. This should be familiar as it's all in your permit. You want to stay within range of these limits. So basically, unless you've got a minimum here, you want it, for instance, for chemical oxygen demand, you need to get 120 or below. This needed for next DMR is telling you that, yes, we expect this to be in your monitoring report on your next DMR. It is possible to NODI these parameters, which means no discharge, and you provide us a code to tell you why. There's more information about that in the guidance documents, and we'll talk about it more in the actual eDMR walkthrough when we get there. But this tells you that, yes, we are expecting you to attempt to monitor this coming quarter. And then this notes field, hopefully we'll have some helpful notes for you to help you understand what's required. So for instance, this is the last quarter of a year for this test permit. You're going to have a little note here to say that this is an annual limit. You don't have to submit it in the first quarter, the second quarter, or the third quarter. You're allowed to noti that. But if we're in the fourth quarter and you have not submitted for the calendar year yet, this note is going to let you know that you need to do that. There may be other notes that you see here that also just give you information that's helpful for when you're trying to determine what limits you're testing for that monitoring period. And it's mostly to do with whether or not an annual limit is required. To go back for just a moment to the needed for next DMR, when we look at this list, we see all these yeses. It will be grayed out in no if you already have reported that or you're in compliance and you don't need to do that parameter anymore. That's why it's helpful to come here at the beginning of each quarter before you do any testing, so that you know that for discharge 0.1 for your annual effluent limit, in this example, you would not have to test for pH as you've already met that requirement. Once you understand what you need to test for, that's when you're going to start your monitoring, get together with your lab, receive the results. Once you have the results and you're ready to go, you are going to click on the Submit eDMR button, and it's going to bring you to A&R Online where you can submit your DMR, and we will go through that in the next video. That should be it for your compliance dashboard. You should get a link to this in an email. You would want to bookmark that link as it's specific to your facility, and you will always want to come here to begin the process of your DMRs.